Hello, and welcome to the Xactly Unleashed Virtual SPM Summit. I'm Jason Rothbaum, and I'll be speaking today about trends in plan consolidation. I am the practice lead in Xactly Strategic Services, and I've been designing sales compensation plans for about 20 years. I have a background in consulting, having been with the Alexander Group as well as Deloitte Consulting. I also ran sales operation divisions at Charter Communications, Adecco Staffing, Sonic Healthcare, and Viridian Energy. Today, we'll be looking at recent trends in plan consolidation and steps companies are taking to prepare for growth. Before we jump into consolidation, I want to give you a very brief overview of our practice. We're a very small group of industry experts. None of us has fewer than 15 years of experience doing this. So we work with companies quickly on best practice design solutions that keep implementation costs low. We can leverage the large database of Xactly benchmarking data to provide industry pay and production comparisons, production being a key differentiator that few, if any, other surveys have, as well as a deep well of technology experts so that any solution design can be implemented quickly and efficiently. So with that, let's jump right in. There used to be this debate about plan consolidation amongst us design experts out there. On one side, you had those who said that reducing the number of plans too much restricted the ability of the company to have flexibility to meet regional strategies. While on the other end of the spectrum, there were those that said that reducing the number of plans allowed for more centralized control of the company and reduced the fiefdoms within it. Well, it turns out that the pro-plan consolidation experts won because it is possible to design plans that allow for flexibility without exploding the number of versions out there. So you can have flexibility with fewer plans. Also, the benefits of consolidation far outweigh those of any potential limitations. For example, because it's easier to drive a centralized strategy with fewer plans, it limits the amount of siloing fiefdoms within an organization. If you have a single centralized design team that it can have access to cutting edge compensation design solutions as well as industry benchmarking material. Whereas if you have the siloed approach, you have to have experts in every single silo, which rarely happens. With a single plan design team with a centralized approach, you create a lot of clarity in the messaging. It reduces the ability of reps to arbitrage. And what that means is transfer from region to region or division to division to try to maximize their pay or try to get easier plans or plans that pay out easier. The other benefit of consolidation is that it allows the company to compare across regions for where the plan is working, how it's working, and what potential benefits there are to changing plans in other places. So it allows the company to compare rates of return. Now, those are the real strategic effects of consolidation. But there are also really tangible benefits from an administrative perspective. If you consolidate plans, you lower the cost to administer. Fewer plans, the less complex the administration and the quicker it is. But also, fewer plans means that it's easier to align cost projections, accruals. You don't have to run so many iterations and run so many plans to determine what you need to accrue and what the budget should be for compensation. Also, with fewer plans, you reduce the risk that any one plan's not following best practices and explodes the payouts. We talked about the forecasting. The fewer plans makes it easier to accrue as well as to forecast. It's also easier to test new designs. With fewer plans, you don't have to go through so many iterations. You can do what ifs on. It's easier to do what ifs on fewer plans. It also reduces rep churn, because if you have more plans, there's more probability of mistake in administration, and you're going to overpay, underpay, and that's going to cause disenfranchisement and churn. So the other difficulty out there is determining what is a plan. Every company I go to, it seems like there's a different definition of a plan. In one company, it'll just be plans that have the same measures of the same plan. Another company, they have to have same payout curves and measures. Okay, well, let's run with two different definitions of what the same plan is. From an administrative perspective, the same plan means that they have the same measures and structure. So they'll have measures, incentive weights, pay triggers, sales crediting rules, measurement and payout timing, and payout curves. In other words, the payout below quota and over quota. So if a plan has the same measures and the same pay triggers, but one plan is paid monthly, the other paid is annually, they're not the same plan. So from an administrative perspective, you can program into the system. They are essentially the same plan if they have those elements that are the same. On the other side, from a strategic perspective, you also have to include pay mix, pay levels, and quota levels, the mechanics of a plan. Because if you don't include those, you could realistically have all of the administrative elements aligned, but someone would have a pay mix of, let's say, 80-20, 80% base, 20% incentive. Another person could have 50-50. They're not the same plan because they're going to act this differently. And you cannot recruit the same types of people for the two different types of plans. You cannot consolidate them. When companies go out and try to compete for talent in the market, a lot of the times it's negotiated, how they get people. And so the plan, the pay levels are negotiated. And I'll tell you, that is where the real difficulty in plan consolidation comes from, the variation in pay mix, pay levels, and quota levels. It really is easy to consolidate plans just based on measures and incentive weights and pay triggers and all those things. The real trends out there are trying to align plans when different salespeople have different pay mixes, pay levels, financial structures. That's the real tough part. So for our purposes, let's define all of these things as the same plan, because that's really where the nuances come in. So when you talk about different ways to consolidate plans, there are two really common methodologies out there. The first one starts at a high level and groups common sales roles into families. You could then create a plan for each job family. It's pretty simple. The problem, though, with this approach is that it usually ends up with tons of exceptions because you can't get everyone's buy-in. You try creating one structure that fits everyone, people are going to say, no, we need an exception here because we have people who do this. Okay, well, then you're going to end up with, instead of going from 30 plans down to 5, you're going to go from 30 down to 20. It turns out to be more difficult to get consolidation because you don't have people's buy-in, but it's quick. The second approach is for the company to design a measure or two that consumes a high percentage of the total incentive pay. These measures are then mandated to be used in every plan, and then you create a list of acceptable measures that can be chosen from for the rest of the plan. So, for example, the company designs a measure with triggers, with crediting rules, all of that laid out, and says that the plan has to have 60% of your incentive weight dedicated to that one measure. The rest of the 40% of the plan you could choose from this list of 4 other measures. And then that's year 1. Year 2, that measure that the company mandated now consumes 70%. And then in year 3, it consumes 100% of the plan. There are much fewer exceptions to this type of approach and more buy-in because you're offering the regions and the divisions flexibility to grab some measures for themselves. This is not where the focus in plan consolidation is, though. Surprisingly, the debate over which measures to use is the easy part. The real trends are in the mechanics and the administration. So let's talk about administration. When there's an administrative push for consolidation, we found that focusing on unique measures is effective rather than the number of unique plans. So you can leverage a few core measures. Say in this example, there are 3 that are created that have the same mechanics, same pay rates, same everything. And you just say that measure 1, measure 2, measure 3. Select from those 3, and you could create multiple plans from them. Plan 1 could have measure 1 and 3. Plan 2 could have measures 1, 2, and 3. from an administrative perspective, you have core measures and it's easier to administer that. From an administrative perspective, that's pretty easy, but you've also created flexibility without increasing the administrative burden. Now, as I noted before, plan measure consolidation has not really been where the emerging trends have been. It's not been with the measures. Companies have actually allowed a greater number of plan measures to allow for flexibility. Instead, the focus has been on plan mechanics and financial risk. For example, companies have sought to create consistency across plans for when sales credit is triggered. I worked with an international company earlier this year that had sales credit in Asia being given at first invoice due to a high number of cancellations, while North America gave credit at contract signing. This created a large amount of financial uncertainty, payout delays and errors, and administrative burden. Even though the measures were the same, they had different triggers because of the different levels of certainty in getting revenue to the company. Another company I worked with sought to create a single payout structure to have more predictable costs. The problem was that one set of sales reps sold lumpy, highly priced products where over quota pay could be explosive, while another set of reps sold more predictable, lower priced transactional products where hitting 110% of your quota was really rare. The company wanted to give more teaming and cross-pollination, but all the reps for the transactional product were complaining of lower pay and not being very cooperative. So that consolidation was really tough, even though they had the same measures and the same payout curves and everything. In these projects, the plan measures were actually pretty quickly delivered, but the real difficult discussions came from the mechanics. And I will bring you in this presentation through one of the recent consolidation issues faced by a few of our customers and some of the resolutions we used. And I'll say that if we have time, we'll maybe fit another in. Okay, so this is an example of some of the pay issues, the consolidation issues that we faced. And each of these was something that came up as a solution last year. And I'll say that all of these can work to reduce the number of plans out there. Each of these is feasible, but they all have their pros and cons. So this was a common issue last year. How can plans be consolidated when there are two teams? And while overall pay is not an issue, because everyone earned the same pay, they all had different pay mixes. This means that the base pay in team one is higher than team two, so they'll have less opportunity to earn high incentives for over quota performance compared to team two. Base salaries were not aligned, and so pay risk is completely all over the place. And the cost of sale will be different depending on the rep that is selling. So how can we resolve this? Well, the common approach recommended by the experts is to not change anything and just adjust pay over time as reps leave and new reps are hired. However, unless you have a ton of rep attrition, this is going to take years. And you're stuck with the issue of having two plan types for a long time. If your company is going to choose that, I usually recommend offering a bonus one-time payment to people to transfer from one plan to the other. The next approach is akin to pulling the Band-Aid off pretty quickly and risks a lot of disruption, including rep churn. This approach involves moving some base up and some down while keeping the total pay constant. So you're changing the pay mix. Those that are getting high pay, getting a high base raise may not deserve it. So what we're doing is we're moving some base up to meet the certain pay mix levels that we want and some base down. So some people are going to get pay raises and some people are going to get base cuts. Overall pay is going to remain the same. So we're just changing the mix. So as I was saying, those that are getting pay raises may not deserve it. So I'll usually recommend some sort of performance milestone that needs to be met in order to qualify, while reps who take a base cut are being asked to take more pay risk. And I'll usually recommend a 1-year increase in over quota pay to compensate them in order to increase that risk. I've taken this pay approach. I've taken this consolidation approach when the differences in pay are not too large. So it doesn't cost the company money. When I was a director of sales ops, I've done this approach. And I will say that in the methodology we chose, the pay differences were pretty extreme, and it cost millions of dollars without an increase in productivity. So that went over pretty poorly, but it was definitely an approach needed because we had grown by acquisition of other companies. So pay mixes were all over the place. The next approach is a base of business. And that was a big hit last year because what you're doing is you're creating two measures in the same plan to rationalize the differences in pay mix that already existed. It also made the reps pretty happy. So I used this 2 or 3 times with big plan consolidations last year. How you do it is an existing customer measure is created and a new customer measure is created. With the existing customer measure, it has low over quota pay, and the new customer measure will have high over quota pay, but they're in the same plan. So the reps with the high base earn the most of their money through an existing customer measure, and their over quota pay was relatively low. The reps that had low base primarily got their pay from the new customer acquisition measure, and their over quota pay was very high because that measure had high over quota pay, and they were pretty happy. Everyone had pay opportunities. So if you had a high base and wanted to earn high over quota pay, you had to acquire more. So the company had a positive ROI on this type of plan. The consolidation happened pretty quickly, and it had a very good ROI for the company. However, you can't always do that, obviously. So the final example was a solution I used also a few times last year, although this was probably not due to the pandemic. It was just popular in mergers. This approach links base levels and incentive levels to quota size. If the quota is above a certain level, then the rep's eligible for a higher base and incentive. If the rep has an issue in getting a base adjustment, okay, take on the higher quota to get the higher base. That's a pretty easy discussion to have with the reps, and it tends to align to the cost of sales a little bit better. Now, this was just one example of the trends that were happening in plan consolidation, but there are many other mechanical and pay structural issues that have taken center stage. What happens when you have reps with high quotas versus and lumpy sales with reps who have low quotas and transactional sales? How do you align those types of plans? Just as an issue. The focus, as I said, has been on resolving situations where there have been differences in plan mechanics and in pay structure and financial risk, rather than in just aligning measures and sales responsibilities. What I wanted to do is also to discuss some of the best practices, generic best practices in consolidation. And I will say I'm available to discuss some of the other complex issues out there. There are many of them. I just brought you through one example. But as far as best practices in plan consolidation, you should keep these in mind if you're pursuing a plan consolidation. First, what is it that they say? No plan survives first contact, and that's usually true. Companies attempt to do everything immediately, but it's usually a good idea to take an iterative approach. Year one changes can be the low-hanging fruit, and you could do that with a minimum level of disruption. Year two changes, you often need to get internal infrastructure ready, so there's a good excuse as to why you're taking a 2-year approach. You often get some change management runway with that. With consolidations, you do need a long runway for the change management. So an iterative approach does have its advantages. Next, if you're looking for a step number 1, create a portfolio of inventory of all the job roles and begin grouping them by common sales processes. And what you're going to find is you're going to see what the real consolidation problems are, size the issue, start finding out what the real cost could be, what the real underlying driver of the consolidation is going to be. It's probably not going to be the measures. Next, as you go through the consolidation, identify the reps that will be most impacted and come up with transition plans. Do not develop compensation plans or don't change the consolidated plans based on the outliers. When I say transition plan, I do not mean adjust the compensation plan, the mechanics or the pay structure. Transition plans work best when they buy your way through the change. You pay money to get out of the change. So retention bonuses, guarantees, SPIPs, they're far less expensive than creating a plan that caters to the outliers. There are some pitfalls that you can avoid. I hear this in every consolidation project. We can't make this change as it'll cause our top producers to earn way less. As I noted before, buy your way out of it. It's much cheaper, and it offers the top performers a way to transition their portfolio and their sales behaviors to match what the consolidated plan will look like. And have an idea as to why you're consolidating. Just consolidating because we want fewer plans usually is not it doesn't drive an end state. When I talk to clients, I want to understand what is the strategy that I'm trying to drive the consolidation towards. If cost of administration is too high, that's going to lead to one type of consolidation. If you're consolidating because you think the company just has too many plans and you want to be able to drive strategy differently, that's a different type of consolidation. If you find that you have too much financial risk in the company, once again, that's going to drive a different type of end state. So I've worked with companies that had 80 unique plans. And yes, there was one that had 80 unique plans in telecom. And they wanted to get it down to 20. But when you dug into it, there was really a reason why there were 80 different plans. They had 80 different sales processes, strategies worldwide that just had too many exceptions. So when we tried pushing for the consolidation, every end game we created, there were flaws with it. So as I said, know why you're trying to do it, and it'll clarify what the end state should look like.